Kate Krauss is the Chief Operating Officer for Fair Food Network. She was previously at Slow Food USA and also at the Nature Conservancy. She's going to talk today about various partnerships and programs of Fair Food Network. I think Florine gave us a little bit of a hint this morning, so she's going to obviously go a little bit deeper. And some of the programs you probably know about, and maybe there's a couple that you aren't as familiar with. So, Kate, come on up.
All right, hello everyone. So thank you, Melissa. It is an honor and a privilege to be here today. I've been asked to speak today, as Melissa mentioned, on behalf of Fair Food Network, and I'm not actually going to talk too much about Fair Food Network's programs specifically, because I think some of you know a lot about those. I want to speak a little bit more about the moment in time that we find ourselves as a movement in Southeast Michigan, and the kind of work that I think really is required of this moment, and some of the things that I've seen in looking around Southeast Michigan. So before I get started with that, I will say a quick thing about Fair Food Network. Many of you probably know our organization. We are a national nonprofit headquartered in Ann Arbor, and we work across the food system to support family farmers, to support local food economies, and of course to increase access to healthy food. So Fair Food Network, as has been mentioned, Florine mentioned, I think, and Melissa did too, was honored to be a strategic partner with the Community Foundation for Southeast Michigan in putting this program together. And when I say that, I should really acknowledge for a moment that it was Orrin Hesterman, right, that was invited to be part of that, and he's the reason why, a lot of the reason why we were brought into that conversation, and he was the one who was invited to speak here today. Unfortunately, Orrin was not able to be here. He's at a pre-existing commitment in Kansas City, and I wanted to just take a moment to acknowledge that I'm not Orrin Hesterman, right, which right, is perhaps is obvious, and that I'm a new face to many of you, and I know that because I see so many new faces out in this audience today. So I do want to say that I'm not new to food, however. As Melissa mentioned, I come to Michigan and to Fair Food Network from many years working in the food movement on the international and national levels, which is an incredible experience, and one from which I was able to meet a handful of you. So I am familiar with the work that's happening, and I bring a comparative experience that allows me to really be able to say that what's happening in Southeast Michigan at this moment in time is incredibly exciting and incredibly special. And I also want to use the experience that I bring to provide the perspective, a bit of a perspective on, as I said, this opportunity in this moment in time for the food movement. We need to do a lot of partnership building and bridge building in order to take advantage of this moment and to really rattle the food system. We need to shake it at its very foundation and bring it down and build a new one in its place. And that's going to require a lot of new thinking and a lot of building on the existing thinking that we're doing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what I see. I hope today that I can be a little bit of a mirror. As someone who's relatively new to this scene, I will share with you, reflect what I see. Certainly in that reflection, I will miss a few things, and I may get some of your programs a little bit wrong, so I hope you'll see that as an opportunity to come share more and we can get to know each other, and that there's not any willful omission in any of this. Before I get started, I want to just say that I'm not actually totally new to Michigan. These lovely people are my ancestors. My grandparents, the attractive couple there on the left, those are my mother's parents. My grandfather grew up in Milan and my grandmother in Plymouth. That's my mom there in the red coat at her house in the backyard in Ferndale. And then the black and white kind of grainy photo there at the bottom is my dad, my uncle, and his parents on the steps of their house on Garland Street in Detroit. So for me, this is a little bit of a homecoming. And when I think about these people, sometimes I think about what food was like for them. What was it like? How did these people think about food? And I imagine sometimes it to be totally different from the way that I think about food. But in some ways, I think it's probably exactly the same. My grandmother, the one there in the corner, she died 30 years ago, but she left behind this cookbook. And this is a way that I feel connection to my grandparents and to my culture. This is, as you can see, a hand-bound cookbook. It's called the Saxon Cookbook, and it was a project that a friend of hers put together to gather up recipes from across the community in Pennsylvania and Ohio that these ladies had put together. They were all ladies at that time. These are recipes that they were gathered from Saxon immigrants from Romania. Now, you can imagine that the Saxon part of Romania is a very particular kind of cuisine. And these are recent immigrants that missed their food culture and they missed their traditions. And so the way to solve that was to create this cookbook and try to access a piece of their history and their culture and tradition. And that's what's so moving about that for me, is that that's the same way that I see culture and the same way that I see food and the same way that I see all of us interacting with food today. Even today, as I said, food connects us like few other things. It reflects our culture, our rituals and traditions. Food sustains us, it nourishes us, food heals us, right? But food can do these other things as well. And in its excess, and its lack, food can take terrible toll on our society. And I'm not gonna do the litany. I'm not gonna talk about all of these things because all of us, by virtue of being in this room, means we've heard this before, we've written this speech, we know the statistics. So I'm not gonna take a lot of time to talk about all of the problems of the food system, except to note one thing. These problems and the problems that we're encountering, these are systemic problems. They're big, gnarly, nasty, horrible issues like structural racism, like poverty, like climate change and corporate control. And so the solutions that we have to embrace must be just as big and just as multi-layered. So this is something that I've learned thinking about big solutions to big problems. This is something that I've learned working, the privilege of working across the country in the food system. And it's also something that I've learned having had the privilege of working for many months now with Oren. I know I speak for him when I say that it's my hope for this opportunity with this exciting and really amazing influx of resources into our movement. It's my hope that we use this opportunity to ensure that the victories that we earn, that each of us earn in our own work, are not isolated ones, but instead that we band together and create big wins, the big wins, the kinds of things that rattle the food system and tear it apart. And I know I echo what has been said before, that the networks, you were talking, Colleen and Megan were talking about networks, and Amanda talked about multi-wins, so I know we're thinking in the same way, and I know that because I see some of the work that you all are doing. So in order to make this kind of change, I believe we need to be deliberate about moving from silos to systems. We need to build bridges across issues and ideologies. So where to start? Well, one of my favorite places to start, and this probably comes from my history of working at Slow Food, is the traditional divide between the foodie and the anti-hunger activist. So the foodie. On one side of this argument over here is the foodie, and this person makes the case that we have to do a better job of paying attention to the real cost of food. That if we want to have fresh fruits and vegetables and healthy food, we need to pay the farmer that grows it the real cost that requires. And obviously this is very true and a very commendable line of thinking. Our food system is economically unjust, it's economically unequal, and we need to be paying attention to creating better food economies. However, when you focus only on the fact that small farms are operating on a loss and you focus only on the cost, you risk having food that tastes good and is good for us become a luxury for the elite. An emphasis on price too often comes at the expense of equitable access. So, on the other side of the argument is the anti-hunger activist, and these people can be focused on preserving calories. Obviously, also commendable, and it is shameful that anywhere in this country or really anywhere around the world people go hungry. However, if we focus only on the protection of calories, we can end up focusing on quantity and not quality. This can have repercussions on health, and it allows us to support national policies that keep food very inexpensive, which again can ignore much needed agricultural improvements and come at the expense of small family farmers yet again. So my point here today is that we should not have to have a question of whether we support hungry families or local farmers. We can do both. We need solutions that deliver access and equity for both farmers and consumers. We need win-win solutions. Happily, from what I can tell and from what I've seen, these kinds of solutions are already happening in our community, and there's a lot for us to build on. I saw Dan here in the audience, and I want to take a moment to talk about Eastern Market, because I think that Eastern Market is one of the best examples of this happening, that at least that I'm come across, again, in my short time here. When I first encountered Eastern Market, it was as I knew it from living in New York as one of the oldest public markets in the country, and it was definitely the place that everyone said I had to visit first when they knew that I was moving to Michigan. Certainly, Eastern Market is a source of a tremendous amount of good food for Detroiters, and it's also a wonderful venue for farmers. Eastern Market is already a win-win solution, but in the last 10 years, it started doing a lot more. There are all kinds of things that Eastern Market is doing. Two of them are pushing out more of their food into the community through mobile markets, and this allows them to reach regions that are underserved by full-line grocers. Eastern Market is also providing nutrition classes so that the people that come through the farmers market can learn more about how to prepare the foods that are available and what kinds of foods are best for their families. There are all kinds of other things, and I know that Dan would say that these programs are not in any way doable without the all kinds of partners that are working on them together. Before we leave the foodies, I want to talk for a minute about something else that they talk about, and that is that food is delicious, right? Food is really wonderful, it's enjoyable, it's community, and it's fun. And I think that sentiment is reflected in the growing food scene across Southeast Michigan, but also around the country. And that's exciting, I know it is, but it's also, it's another place where we risk stepping into a silo. Because without responsibility, enjoyment of food and pleasure is just gluttony, right? It doesn't have to be that way, however. We could have solutions that celebrate taste, that celebrate food, and that also encourage flourishing, equitable local food economies. And yet again, we have a great example of, actually we have many, many great examples of this across this region. And one that I recently learned about that I was pretty excited about is this Made and Growed in Detroit program that is a product of two really cool organizations that you probably know, Food Lab and Keep Growing Detroit. Food Lab is a membership organization that supports and is made of good businesses trying to grow good businesses in Detroit. They have a lot of really wonderful entrepreneurs and small business owners in their network, and Keep Growing Detroit, as you also probably know, is a network of urban farmers within the city limits of Detroit. And working together, Food Lab is working through their network of small business owners to source fruits and vegetables from right next door in the city limits of Detroit through Keep Growing Detroit's network of urban growers, which is super cool. And it allows us to have delicious jams and pickles and pies and cakes that benefit not only the restaurants and the stores that are selling them, and not only the entrepreneurs that are making them, but also the most local of farmers, the ones who live right there in Detroit. And of course, doesn't that look delicious, right? There's another group that benefits, and that's all of us who get to enjoy this delicious food, knowing that we can feel really good about where it came from. So the final silo that I want to talk about building bridges out of is the silo of working on a single issue with a single solution. This kind of thinking is the kind of thinking that brings us trying to fix childhood obesity by introducing skim milk at school lunch, or trying to fix global hunger by introducing a genetically modified seed that increases yield. We can debate the relative merits of those particular programs another time, but what I will say is that focusing on one solution to one problem, the problem there is that at the very best, those kinds of solutions are insufficient. At worst, however, they can exacerbate the very problems that they're trying to fix. So again, I think that we need to stop thinking about the silo of a single issue, and certainly the silo of a single solution to that single issue, and build a bridge to a systemic, holistic approach. The group that I want to call out here, someone you may be familiar with, this is Betty Wiggins, who is the head of the Office of School Nutrition for Detroit Public Schools. She's an incredible woman, and in the 4 years that she has been in charge of the Detroit Public Schools food program, she's done some incredible things to change it. Certainly there's a long way to go, and I know she would be the first to say that there's a lot more she'd like to do, but here's some of the things that she's done. So in the last 4 years, the first thing that she did was to do away with the tater tots and the chicken nuggets and that kind of thing. And if Betty Wiggins were the kind of person that was focusing on a single issue and a single solution, she might have stopped there. She might have introduced some boneless or skinless chicken breasts and some low-fat salad dressing and called it a day. But instead, Wiggins' kids are eating jicama, they're eating sugar snap peas, they're eating whole grain bread, and their school breakfasts and lunches. And what Wiggins was doing was she was thinking not just about health, but she was thinking about culture. What is it that these kids are eating at home, and what's sort of appropriate for the places where they're coming from? She was thinking about taste. These kids deserve to have food that tastes good. And even more exciting, she was thinking about where the food comes from. By doing away with the outside management company that had been servicing the Detroit Public Schools, she was able to free up creativity and resources to allow her to really increase buying from local sources. Again, not a perfect program, but from what I understand, she's sourcing 22% of the school food from local sources, which is, I think Megan was talking about the Michigan Good Food Charter goal of 20%, and so already she's exceeding that goal. Some of that produce comes from the school gardens. There's 76 of them across the public school system now, which is again a really exciting thing that allows the classroom to be the cafeteria to be an extension of the classroom. So I would say that this is a really great example of a win-win that benefits multiple places of the food system. Betty Wiggins didn't stop at one issue. Instead, she thought holistically and systemically, and her schools are delivering wins not only in health and taste and food education, but also in supporting local farmers and the local food economy as well. From having worked in school gardens a lot in my previous role, I don't think it's too much to say that her work has set a standard nationally of what's possible. A final example of a solution that delivers wins is one from my own organization, and it's the one that Florine Mark mentioned in the beginning of this program, and that's called Double Up Food Bucks. I won't spend too much time talking about it because I know she mentioned it and you may be familiar with it, but the idea is that Double Up Food Bucks is an incentive program that works to increase healthy food access among low-income consumers while also supporting local farms and local food economies. You sense a theme. How it works is, so Double Up Food Bucks gives SNAP consumers a one-for-one match to purchase healthy, locally grown fruits and vegetables. So what that means, if a family spends $20 of their SNAP money on locally grown fruits and vegetables, they receive another $20 in Double Up Food Bucks tokens, in most places they're tokens, that they can use to spend on locally grown fruits and vegetables. So they can walk home with $40 worth of fruits and vegetables for just $20. The wins here are threefold. Low-income families bring home more healthy food, farmers gain new customers and hopefully make more money, and more food dollars stay in the local economy. Each of these wins has ripples across the entire community. As with the examples described above, this program was specifically designed with multiple wins in mind and to cross sectors and build bridges. I want to just kind of emphasize that point, that the idea was like specifically thinking about how to be a positive multi-win solution. The other thing that I want to say about this program that is also true of all of the other programs that I just mentioned is that they were specifically put together with partners, and certainly the Double Up program couldn't work without a myriad number of partners, from the farmers markets and the grocery stores to the Michigan Farmers Market Associations and many, many more. So I think that the most important thing for us to take away, and as we try to harness this really exciting moment, is the idea of partnership building and bridge building with multi-win solutions. So I just will end by saying that it's very exciting for me to be here now. It's very exciting for me to be part of an organization and a program that is thinking in this way. Even beyond that, beyond the excitement I have of working at Fair Food Network, it's really cool to be here and to hear all of the things that I'm learning about the work that you're doing. I'm really excited to be part of a group that are thinking big thoughts about solutions that can tear things down and rebuild them in a better way. I guess I'll just end by saying that I know that I have a lot to learn about Michigan, but I've seen enough to know that the revolution is starting here, and I'm really happy to be part of it with all of you. So thank you.